Welcome back for the final session. Now here's a question for you. How do you eat more and lose weight? You're about to find out, because this session, it's all about jockeys, etc., but it's all about human beings and how we can make ourselves healthier, both mentally and physically, and look good at the same time. I'm going to start at this end just so you know who we've got. This is probably the leading consultant in the world as to weight loss. He invented this incredible idea, and he now looks after some of the world's most famous people. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause. He's come from Beirut. It is Dr. Jamal Hout. The next man comes from Germany. He is the boss of the German jockey school. He is a man who broke his back and neck twice and survived. This guy is a top man, and I'm pleased to say he is now the advisor for the apprentices and the young lady jockeys on the Sheikh Mansoor Festival. Please welcome the one and only Kai Sherman. The next gentleman is one of the best racing advisors in the world. When he was racing advisor to Turkey, he helped them win the apprentice Sheikh Fatima Sheikh Mansoor World Championship in Abu Dhabi 3 years ago. He is now the racing advisor in Malaysia and Vietnam. He comes from Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Watson. There's not many people called Xavier, but this man is. He was born in France. He's been based in the United Arab Emirates. He's not just a top jockey and a top guy. He really understands the world of racing. And when this guy talks, I listen. Ladies and gentlemen, Xavier Ziani. The lady in the middle has come from Australia. She has ridden nearly 1,300 winners. She is the top lady jockey in Australia. We're very pleased to welcome her here for the first time. She has already ridden a Group 1 winner. It's an honor and a privilege to have the top lady jock from Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Linda Meach. The guy sitting next to her also used to be a jockey. And as you can see, he's quite thin. He is a very, very good racing doctor. And as a man who rode as an amateur jockey, he knows what jockeys go through every day of the week. And sometimes it's not pretty. But this guy is right on the ball, and I'm pleased to say he is the doctor for the Sheikh Mansoor Festival. Please welcome Dr. Philip Pritchard. It's nice to have somebody young on the panel, and I'm very pleased to welcome this young man. This guy wants to help people improve their diet. And because of the Sheikh Mansoor Festival a few years ago, which supported the John Moores University in Liverpool, the idea was taken up by the British Horse Racing Authority in London. And they've given this guy a grant to work hard and to become hopefully a professor or a doctor. He's a young man, so he knows what the youngsters are going through. Please welcome live on stage, Daniel Martin. The next guy with the curly hair comes from Liverpool. And as he comes from Liverpool, he has a very strange accent, all right? So you know your earphones and you've got the translators. Obviously, 1 is for Arabic, 2 is for English, 3 is for Italian, and 4 is for Scouser, which is what he speaks. He loves Liverpool. This guy is one of the leading brains in the world of sport as to how to eat more, lose weight, keep fit, and this guy has proved it. And I'm pleased to say that it's thanks to the Sheikh Mansoor Festival who helped this guy in the John Moores University in Liverpool that he's here today. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Dr. George Wilson. And the young fellow at the end who has been on the regime to lose weight, it worked, but as you can see, he then put it all back on. He is one of our top commentators, and he's the #1 Arabian commentator in English. Ladies and gentlemen, your moderator. Big round of applause, Gary Capewell.
Thank you, Tomo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd just like to thank His Highness Sheikh Mansoor and, of course, Lara Sawaya for inviting me and organising this fantastic event. We've had 2 fantastic sessions so far. This is the third, and we've got quite a few more to come over the next coming days. This one's all about jockeys making weight. A couple of years ago, the Liverpool John Moores team were invited to help with regards to this cause, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what they've done, research so far, and what they've done over the last 6 months since we last spoke about this a little bit later on. But it remains a big, big problem, not only in the UK, but all over the world. Jockeys are continuing to undertake severe food and drink restrictions to try and make weight. This obviously is affecting them not only physically, but mentally as well, and we're going to touch on all aspects of that over the next hour and a quarter or so. Obviously, that has a negative effect on their performance as well. So we'll talk through that with the doctors and all the research that they've done. I'm going to begin by talking to the jockeys, though. We're quite lucky. These 2 jockeys are particularly quite lucky because they don't struggle that much to make the weight that they have to do in their respective nations. But I'll begin with Zayed. You've been riding for 16 years, but you've ridden in over 10 different countries as well. You yourself haven't perhaps struggled with your weight, perhaps as some of your other weighing room colleagues, but how have you seen what has happened in the weighing room and the things that you've seen your colleagues do, and how has it changed since you first started riding?
Okay. First, I would like to say thanks to His Highness Sheikh Mansoor and Mrs. Lara Sawaya for inviting all of us, and I'm very proud to be here today to talk in front of you. Myself, my experience as a jockey, as you say, I'm lucky because I'm having a light body, I'm having light bones, so I don't have much problem with my weight at the moment. But in my experience, what I've seen, when I first started to be jockey, when I start at 18, I start late in the business. What I discovered in France, we had no any doctors, no any helpers for us to tell us what to eat, how to manage ourselves, how to exercise, to train ourselves to keep our weight low. So myself, what I did, it was not really helpful, but I did it. I went to the doctor, and they took my blood, and they check everything, like to say, okay, you can eat this, don't eat that, you can do this, you can do that. So it really helped me at the moment. And for some jockeys, it's not easy. We are lucky, both of us. We don't have weight problems, but for some jockeys, it's really, really difficult. It's a battle every day because we have to keep our weight constant, low, every day. It's not only like for one day, like boxing. Boxer can lose weight. They can manage to put them weight down for one battle. But soon they pass on the scale, they can hit. Ourselves, we have to manage to keep our weight low, to pass on the scale, to ride the horse, and to come back at the same weight, which is really difficult.
And with regards to what you see now, because obviously we need to teach the apprentices, the younger jockeys first, obviously we'll talk about this a bit in detail a bit later on, some of the older jockeys that are rather set in their ways and they don't like the change. With regards to the younger jockeys, is it more of a case that some of those are doing the practices that perhaps they shouldn't be doing at the moment? And obviously, if they continue to do that, it will have a negative effect long term. But if they start doing it whilst they are relatively in the early stages of their career, they'll continue to do it throughout their career.
Yeah. The thing is, the population is growing. Most of the jockeys coming taller and taller. So at certain point, you can't be 50 kilo if you are 1.75 meters. I have the example of Christophe Soumillon, which is one of the best jockeys in the world. He's having to fight every day with his weight because he's 174, and we ask him to ride 54 kilo, which is his minimum weight. And for that, he has to fight. It's really, really hard. What I see now in France, I'm talking about France, the jockey school is helping the apprentice, the new apprentice, to maintain them weight. They really have now, how can I say, help for them to maintain them weight. But we still, I believe, very low in this thing for us. We must improve, jockeys. We must improve ourselves to have more information about that.
That's something where the racing schools come in as well. But I'm just going to bring Linda in here now. Linda's ridden over, as Tomo rightly pointed out, 1,200 runners as recently as Sunday, the Castican Cup. I was doing the research that you rode a winner there, and you were involved in the ladies series in Morocco. You finished third there just a few weeks ago. You were telling me in Australia the minimum weight, notwithstanding weight for age, is a little bit higher than it is in most other major racing nations. I think it's around about 54 kilos, I think. But you were telling me that you had to give up a ride in the Cox Plate, which is one of the most famous races in Australia, which is a handicap run just before for the Melbourne Cup. You had to give a ride up in that race because you couldn't make the weight.
Yeah, that's right. I struggle if I have to lose too much weight. I can't think clearly. I might be able to make the weight on the horse, but I'm not able to ride well. So I decided it was better for myself to forgo the ride than to ride the horse in the race and not ride it properly, and it wouldn't be fair to the owners. The Cox Plate's probably one of our toughest, well, it's our best weight for age race, and it's a very tactical race, and you need to be very sharp to ride in it, and to not ride well and maybe to cost that horse the win. I probably couldn't live with the mistake, so I'm better off not getting that light. I think the last time I rode light was a 50 kilo race. I rode 50 kilos at Moonee Valley, and it takes a lot out of you to ride that light, and not only that, my weight's pretty consistent, but when you start getting lower than what you should, your body doesn't recover as well, and I found it hard to even ride 54 for a few months after that. So I like to not ride as light and give myself a better opportunity of winning a lot more races.
He's obviously reaping the water of saying of the 1,200 winners, but you've obviously seen, I would imagine, therefore, that some of your weighing room colleagues probably don't have the same attitude with regards to that as you do, though.
I don't think they do, but I think a lot of them are learning now, especially in Australia. Probably as long as 10 years ago, they banned Lasix and diuretics, and we've got a drug policy. We've all got to be drug-free, and we get tested and things like that. And I think it's easy to take those shortcuts, but in the long run, they don't help you at all. They make it harder, and you struggle more with your weight, and you don't think as well. And I think just the hard way is the best way, to eat properly and to exercise well and cut out all the salt and other bad, highly refined foods is probably the best way, even though it's not the most fun way to live your life.
It's interesting how it varies, I think, from country to country. We'll come on to that a little bit later on, and the healthy eating, we'll get to the doctors a little bit later on as well. I'm going to bring Chris Watson and Kai Schrimmer in now, both work or have worked for racing schools in the past. Chris, if I begin with you, you've worked in many different countries, in Australia with Racing Victoria, in Turkey as well with the racing school, and obviously now based in Malaysia and Vietnam. We're just about to start racing. But you were telling me earlier on some of the things that you had to deal with. What happens in Australia is, I think this is, I've not heard of this anywhere else, where they have sauna seminars, you were saying, and it's very, very heavily policed in Australia with regards to the how much time jockeys can spend sweating, if you like. That was something you said that I wasn't aware of that happened anywhere else. I don't think it does. Obviously, as we were saying, the minimum riding weight is a little bit higher in Australia, but even still, it's interesting to see how strictly it is policed over there.
Yeah, about 10 years ago in Australia, we took a holistic approach of educating not just the apprentices but also the jockeys on a whole range of issues, which included weight control. And the sauna seminars that you talk about were conducted with the local Institute of Sport, and they would run a seminar educating about sauna use, and you had to attend that. If you wanted to use the sauna on race day, you had to attend one of those seminars conducted by the Institute. And once you'd completed that, you were able to use the sauna on race day, but in a restricted way. And I think it might be 15 minutes, Linda, at a time. And there's someone on the door who will monitor that. They'll check your name off, and you can't use it again after that.
Interesting. And with regards to the other experiences that you've seen, obviously in the various countries that you've worked, obviously with the racing school in Turkey, the advice that you were giving out to the young apprentices, what was the nutritional advice that you were given, or giving out, sorry?
Yeah, Turkey's quite advanced in nutritional sort of education. They work with one of the Istanbul universities, and there's a professor who heads the athletic nutrition department, and she supervises the apprentice program there. So her people will come in once a month. They'll come in at 5 a.m. in the morning, and they'll do the testing of the body fats, the skin folds, the BMI testing, and we get all the results back. And that same professor is monitoring their diet. So she's working with the local catering company because it's an in-house program. So she's working with the local catering company to provide foods that are going to be nutritious. They're going to provide them with lots of energy for their activities within the school. So every month in the jockey school in Turkey, we were getting their body fat levels, their body mass index, all those figures which were important. At the end of the year, we could really see if the program was working, and it was working very well. They'd come to us as 15-year-old, only boys still at the moment, boys in the school, and with a little bit of body fat, and they'd lose all that over that time. So their body mass, the muscle and bone would improve, but the fat would disappear.
And that's something that we've learned with the doctors with regards to the bones and the strength and whatever with regards to that. We talked about that last year. We'll probably maybe touch on that a little bit later on. Kai, just next to Christopher, obviously you were a former jockey as well yourself, and have involved quite heavily with the German racing school, and now involved as a jockey coach for the Ladies in the Apprentice World Series, which obviously goes all over the world, involves all different different riders from different nations as well. With regards to when you were riding, how has it changed in terms of what the practice is, or how bad has it got now compared to what it was back then, perhaps?
For myself, when I was jockey, I had not problems like him. I could ride 50 kilos, and it was not a problem for me. But I see now all the young boys and the girls, they get more taller and more bigger. For them, it's very hard to ride 52, 53 kilos. So normally they have 56, 57, 3 or 4 days before the race. They start to don't eat anymore, go in the sauna and sweating, running, and Lasix is not allowed anymore, but some of them, they flip. And this is not good. It's not good for the body, and also not good for the mind of everything. And we start to do it in Germany now. We have Dr. Wind. He's the doctor from Hamburg, from the racetracks. He works with some racetracks together, with the jockey school also, and we start to teach them how to do it right, how to lose weight right, make diet and make sport and everything on the right way.
We'll bring the jockeys back in here actually now, because obviously you've ridden all over the world in different countries. How have you found, because in the UK there was quite a lot made about the catering and the available food at a certain tracks for jockeys a couple of months ago. How have you found the different catering at in the different countries that you've ridden in? Linda first.
We're really lucky in Australia, we have great catering. We've got a fantastic jockeys association and fantastic race clubs in Racing Victoria. The food's really good in every state in Australia. We're pretty spoiled, I think. And same in Singapore. You ride there and it's as good as a lot of restaurants. You can have whatever you want to eat, but I think we're a bit spoiled.
And Xavier, as I say, you've ridden over 10 different countries, obviously primarily based in Qatar and the UAE in Qatar as well, but you've ridden the likes of France, Switzerland, plenty of other places, Mauritius as well. How does it vary from country to country?
Well, I will start by Emirates. The catering in Emirates, it's like in Medan. When you are riding in Medan, we have proper kitchen. But if I be honest, the food is not adapted to ourselves. It's like a restaurant. So basically for us, before we ride, we can't have access to that unless you have a really high weight. Otherwise, in France, you don't have any catering in the jockey room. You may have, like myself, when I was riding, you may have like chocolates by your valet, stuff like that, water, but that's all. In Mauritius, there is nothing as well. You will find the same snacks, but you won't find much to eat. And basically, what I believe, we can ask Linda as well, but before racing, we don't need to eat. No, you know, we are going to competition. If you eat, I would say something local people will understand. Match boost. You don't need to go racing after that. Match boost, it's rice with meat or fish. You don't need to go racing after that. You just want to sleep. So basically, before we go racing, most of us, we are struggling with our weight. The only thing we want is to have water. I don't have weight problem, but I do remember the first ride I got in Dubai. I was in Dubai for 2 months. And the boss told me, Xavier, I have a ride for you. So I could not say no. The ride was 51 kilo. I was 54 kilo. He told me that on Monday. The race was on Sunday in Abu Dhabi. I had to lose 4 kilo in 6 days. At this time, it was really hard because it was my first time in Dubai and my body kept all the water. So during this week, I ate only apples and I was taking an ice cube as a water because I could not take anything else during a week. So you can imagine after that, when you are on the horse, you can't have the power. So basically, like, the only small food we can have, I think it's like chocolates, things who's giving us power quick. But we don't need a proper food in the jockey room or after racing.
I'm probably a little bit different. I ride 6 days a week and I need to eat. I don't eat a lot because you don't want to have a great big full stomach when you're going to the gates. But I'll eat sandwiches or fruit or something, small things, a little bit of something small right throughout the day because I'll have 8 or 9 rides at a meeting, and if you don't keep your energy up, you can't concentrate properly. So I'll drink and eat during the day. And even if I maybe have to lose a kilo or half a kilo during the day, I'll still have a cup of coffee and half a piece of toast or a piece of toast in the morning. And I'll still have a little bit to drink during the day as well, depending on the amount of rides. But if it's 40 degrees some days, I'll drink a lot during the day, not only because I'm thirsty, but if I don't, I'll weigh in too light because you sweat so much. You want to make sure that you don't win a race and get disqualified because you haven't made the weight.
But that's one of the interesting things, because not only do obviously the minimum weight vary from country to country, but the amount of racing that takes place in each country varies massively. I mean, like in the UAE, there can often be 3 or 4 meetings a week. But in the UK and probably Australia and more than that, you get sort of 6 or 7 meetings per day. So obviously, some jockeys are obviously riding more, and they find it easier to keep the weight off that way. But there are other ways of helping the weight off, and we'll bring in Dr. Jamal Hoot here now. I've tried to memorise this, but I've gone completely. You're an NAET specialist, which stands for Nabi Purad's Allergy Elimination Techniques. Whoever was with us in Abu Dhabi a couple of years ago will have seen the demonstration that Dr. Jamal did with me. Still not eating the turkey, Dr. Jamal, you'll be pleased to know, so that's okay. In terms of your what you actually do, you've worked with Laura and a few other people in the past. To some people that might not know the work which you do, just explain it.
Just from what we already heard, everybody, it's very difficult to control his weight. And we know all the research that's being done. Our metabolism determines our weight loss or weight gain. And it's well known that any food item that you are intolerant to will disrupt this metabolism. And that's what's already is going on. So whatever you eat which is bad for you, you will not be able to control your weight. And this is where I go into this, determining the food allergies that you have, or the food intolerances, let's say. And this is how you can control your weight easily without being starving all the time or just drinking water. Just eat what's proper for you and your metabolism will work very well. And this is how you can maintain your weight. And the technique that I use, we can determine food allergies through different procedures. We can take a blood test, we can monitor the bioenergetic stress levels. And what I do is a muscle response testing, which is a kinesthesiology part of, which determines the energy imbalance caused by these food elements that are bad for our body. And this procedure, just what it means that when we just muscle test anybody, this sensory nerves which are in the belly of the muscle will record this pressure that we test with. It directly goes to the spinal cord and brain, and which in turn sends back a message to the muscle through the motor nerves. And this is when it's a bad response, it means this item that we are testing is bad for the body. It's blocking its energy. And this is how we can determine what's the food intolerance that this guy has. And from there on, we go into an elimination diet, getting out all the bad items. And this is where the metabolism will go back right away to a good effect. And this is how they can lose the weight and control their body mass.
And I remember you did a presentation, I think, last year at this particular conference, and the statistics of the percentage of how many people had lost significant weight from following what you'd said. I think it was around about 87, 88%, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. Who follows religiously what we are doing, definitely they will lose all the bad fat that they have. And if I remember well, statistically, it was almost 70 to 80% who lost the weight. But it was not the percentage who can maintain the weight, because not everybody will listen later on.
And the science, which we're going to speak to the doctors from the Liverpool John Moores, they say exactly the same a little bit later on. And I believe we're maybe going to be testing a few of the jockeys a little bit later on. Logistically, there's been a slight issue with that, I think, so far, Dr. Jamal. Is that correct?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Well, you're going to be using your techniques with some of the younger jockeys involved with the series.
Yeah, that's the plan now. We need to give them a proper food items that they can be maintained on, and without doing all the starvation things that they are doing. This will improve their metabolism, and they will keep on a very good health later on.
And Dr. Pritchard, you've worked in racing for quite some time, not only as a trainer, a jockey as well, and you work still on the race courses in the UK as a doctor, over 100 days a year. The situation, particularly in the UK now, there was a big piece about this in the Racing Post, which I've actually got with me just down here earlier on in the year, with regards to, we'll call it flipping. One of the doctors, obviously was with us in November, links it to bulimia. But For you, do you think it's the worst it's ever been so far in the UK at the moment?
Certainly, with regard to flipping and the flat jockeys, I'm probably going to be held on record, but I would say 75% of the UK jockeys may be flipping at some time or another. I think it's absolutely appalling, and these facts need to come out. We've just heard about weight loss. I want to take you back a couple of steps. Yes, this particular session is about weight loss, but what we're looking to do is improve the lot of the jockey holistically, and we've already touched on the holistic approach. We have the two experts here who hopefully are going to tell us about what to eat and how to eat it and when to eat it, and that's great. But I want to take the conversation a little bit wider later in the session to look at the holistic approach. But yes, certainly flipping in the UK is amongst the flat jockeys is a major problem.
And you were talking about, obviously, we're talking about the physical impacts as well, but the mental aspect as well, and you were talking with Dr. Jamal about that before, the obviously the negative effect that it has mentally.
Yes, 2.5 years ago, when I slightly hijacked the conference in Abu Dhabi and suggested that we could do something to improve the jockeys' weight, we set out a few objectives. Obviously, involvement of Liverpool, John Moores was the most important, but we also wanted to look at the psychological aspects of jockeys. And on the team at the time, we had Dr. Kostas Papageorgiou, who's world-renowned psychologist and also a doctor, and his figures, of those of you who came to the presentation, were frightening. George may slightly disagree, but it was about 75% of the jockeys that we were testing showed signs of clinical depression, and 10% showed signs of suicidal tendencies. And these are the sort of things that I think we ought to be expanding the conversation to. Certainly we've taken our eye off the ball as far as that side of looking after the jockeys is concerned. And quite rightly, we've concentrated on the weight, because obviously the weight is a very, very big factor in that. But I hope after the boys have done their presentation to expand things a little bit more.
And Xavier touched upon this earlier, because we talk of jockeys as athletes, but with regards to the jockeys, Xavier touched upon it, it's like no other lifestyle. You don't just have to make weight for one fight, for example. You've got to make weight constantly, day after day, week after week, year after year. It's like no other sportsman, really. And then obviously the impact you were saying as well, Philip, that they starve themselves and then eat afterwards. What happens after? That's the depression, that side of it as well.
Sorry, I didn't really get the...
Sorry, that was more directed at Philip, actually, sorry.
Sorry. Yes, the eating habits, as I said, I'm going to leave to the boys, the experts, okay? Certainly, every diet works. I do not know a diet that doesn't work, because if they didn't work, people wouldn't do them. The question is, can you maintain that diet for the rest of your days? I dislike the term diet. I've always talked about the term regime. Eating is part of your regime as far as your weight management is concerned. And diets immediately make you think that you need to deny yourself. The boys have done the work and are going to explain dieting and losing weight does not mean starving yourself. You can eat and lose weight. But as again, we're talking about the holistic approach, the mental thing of staying on a diet. I suspect most ladies in the audience will admit that sometime they've tried to lose a few pounds and they will lose weight. But inevitably they will put it back on plus a little bit more, because they are mentally unable to sustain that way of eating. Use the French word regime. It is a regime. It's all about your lifestyle, your exercise, and everything else. And this is why I think we need to concentrate on a holistic approach, which hopefully we will do in the future.
I'll bring in Daniel Martin. You've recently joined the Liverpool John Moores team in October. You're a member of the Professional Jockeys Association, which is the member which looks after all the jockeys in the UK. You're part of their nutritional team. Used to be a lecturer in exercise and physiology and sports and nutrition, and you've worked with numerous different sports as well, rugby league, athletics and hockey, and I believe recently you've been running some cookery workshops for jockeys as well.
Yes, so off the back of all the research that pretty much George and the team have done at Liverpool, John Moore's, we're taking it into the direction of like educating the jockeys, and to be honest, giving them the information that they need, so not necessarily going into all of the theory, but giving them the applied guidance and the skills, and one of those outlets is via cookery workshops. I'm not a chef, I'm not a trained chef, I'm not a cook or anything like that. I'm a nutritionist, and I know how to cook simple foods that fit into the lifestyles of jockeys. What we've got to consider is the lifestyle and the culture that jockeys lead. Early mornings, extremely long days, quite exhaustive days at some points. So it's about giving them food and meals that they can prepare in the time that they've got. That also, to be honest, tastes good and it's something they're going to want to eat as an alternative to fast foods and things that historically we've found that they have chose.
And how many jockeys have been involved with those workshops with you thus far? They've been obviously quite recently.
Yeah, so numbers, if we put it into perspective, quite small, and just the ones that are currently involved with the Injured Jockeys Fund clinics. So we at present we've got 2 in the UK, and I'll touch on it a little bit more in the presentation. One in the north of England, one in the south, and not just me, the other members of the PGA nutrition team as well. I've been working with young jockeys for probably the last year and a half or so since we've really started sort of pushing forwards off the back of George's research.
We'll bring in George now. Obviously, we all know Dr. George Wilson. used to ride, of course, George, yourself.
Years ago, yeah.
Quite a while ago. But George was influential in getting the minimum riding weight in the UK raised a couple of years ago by a kilogram to 2.8 stone, wasn't it? But with regards to what we'll get onto the presentation literally after in just a few moments, but the work that George did with the jockeys when we first started this, we had the Soulmate Food, which is a company in the UK which produced the meals for the jockeys day in, day out. That was the start to getting them to that way, but now you've taught them through the same sort of processes, which we're going to mention a little bit later on, that you can actually do that themselves and maintain the weight that they need to be.
Excuse me. Just to expand upon that point, Gary, you have to sort of emancipate people. I mean, you can't hold people's hand forever and keep delivering food to the house. First of all, Lara's not going to give us the money to do that because it costs a lot of money. I mean, everybody would be happy if someone said, I'm going to provide your meals individually, specifically made for you and feed you for the rest of your life while you're a sports person. I mean, what a life that would be.
It was good, though.
Yeah, it was good. But we had to look at how they then took that on board and basically educated themselves that this, as Phil says, this is the regime that they can sustain, enjoy, have the energy to feed and to cater for the demands of the sport. And being a jockey, believe it or not, the energy demands compared to other sports are absolutely minimal. I mean, a jockey will push a horse on the flat, absolutely flat out. Very anaerobic sport in that sense, because it's all out for maybe 2-3 furlongs. But they'll expend 50-60 calories, and we've tested them, we know this. But when it's a long day, as Dan was saying, you still have to feed people throughout the day. But the crux of the key to what we've done is that they have to be able to, firstly, be able to walk alone by themselves, feed themselves, and buy into the regime.
Yeah, and as you pointed out, those jockeys that did start out with that particular company that have done that now, they've stopped. They've just followed your advice, and they, like you say, they have stayed where they need to be. Yeah,
we've got some of the most senior jockeys in the UK, household names, I'm sure everybody in the audience will know, who follow the regime, stick to it, realise and recognise that they are athletes, and this is what comes with being a professional athlete. So, I mean, but it's, again, it's not just for jockeys because it's about that lifestyle And like Phil Pritchard says, it's not about a diet. I hate that word diet. If that's the case, we're all on a diet, because we all have to eat to survive. It's about your choice, about what you put in your mouth, how that affects your body. And it's not rocket science, because you have to go back to the old adage of what comes naturally is best. And Gary, yourself, you followed the advice and the regime, and you've seen a substantial weight loss in yourself. I know Tomo said you put it back on, but I know for a fact you, on a serious note, you have substantial weight loss. And that works for everybody on the planet, unless you have some kind of physiological condition, which, a hormone imbalance perhaps, a thyroid imbalance. But what I would say is, just generally, it's not rocket science, I have to add that. But for a jockey, as the jockeys on the panel were saying, there's no other sport in the world like it, because they have to make weight every day, sometimes 364 days a year, because you don't race on Christmas Day. There's no other sport. And for me, I would say, even though physically it may be the toughest sport in the world for a demand of energy, it is mentally the toughest sport in the world. To maintain your weight every day and think I've got to step on the scales every day. And I'm going back in the 80s when I rode as a jump jockey, only as an amateur. But I mean, I'm just under 6 foot, 179 meters tall. And I was getting down to 69 kilo, 65 kilo, 64 kilo, ridiculous weights for my height.
So you were riding in jump races, obviously, you need to clarify that.
Yeah, the jump racing carries a lot more weight. But it's the same thing. And, I take my hat off to them, but we need to help the jockeys, but they need to see themselves and help themselves as well.
Well, speaking of which, obviously we're 2.5 years now into this study. You believe you've got a presentation on your most recent 6 months, so if you'd like to...
Can we fire it up, please? And Dan's going to start it,
So I'll take this opportunity actually on behalf of myself, Phil, George and the rest of the Liverpool John Moores team that weren't able to travel out. Thanks very much for the invite, the opportunity to present and speak upon this stage. The purpose of this presentation then isn't necessarily to go over George's research that's been done for the last 3 years, because that's been done previously, although I will, for the purpose of context, skim over it for the first few minutes. But we're sort of going to really talk about where are we now, how has George's research influenced the applied element of the sport and what I do on a day-to-day basis, and where we see it going over the next couple of years. So going back 3 years ago, as Gary alluded to, the purpose of, one major element of George's research was to try to remove the necessity to rely on the archaic practices that we see up on the slides there, from your day-to-day regime such as using the sauna, salt baths, etc., through to the more extreme strategies of diuretics, laxatives and self-induced vomiting or flipping. And although we can't really deny they are effective, it's an exceptional detriment to their health, hormonally, physiologically and psychologically. And I'm not going to bang on and rattle on about the facts and the figures, so I'll just pull out a couple of key ones. But for example, the impact of bone health, lack of calories, lack of calorie intake, lack of vitamin D, lack of calcium, all these things combined can create a condition what we call osteopenia. And out of the jockeys that have been researched, on the flat, we estimate 6 out of 10 jockeys at present are what we call osteopenic. To put that into context, that's the similar or same bone health as you'd expect to see from a 50 to 60 postmenopausal female. And we're finding these levels of bone condition in young athletes, in 20 to 35-year-old males. Psychologically, in terms of their own mood profile, but also the psychological impact when on the horse. Myself and Dr. Jerry Earle back over in the UK make reference to the drink-drive limit. Performing or riding a horse dehydrated isn't too dissimilar from drink driving, and we certainly don't advocate driving a car at 35 or 40 miles an hour. So why on earth should we think it's acceptable to do it on a horse? And then perhaps what rings, well, I hope rings most true to jockeys, if they don't give that much regard to their health, it affects the performance. And from the studies that George did, we found that being dehydrated, a lack of energy, inhibits maximal VO2 uptake, the pushing frequency whilst on a riding simulator, and maximal strength is also compromised. So, through the research that George has done over the last few years, we know a hell of a lot more than we used to do. We didn't know the physiological demands of the sport, which we now do. We had an idea, but it was never really documented what were the dietary habits of jockeys. We've got a really good profile of what that is now. And perhaps most importantly, and where we're going to move forward now, is we've found a way to make jockeys lose weight, permanent weight, whilst being hydrated, and not only maintaining their performance markers, actually improving them as well. So there's a slide up behind me there, which sort of illustrates in a very simplistic way of the regime that we get the athletes to follow, which is basically a large increase in protein uptake to around 2.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, maintain fat intake at around 1 gram per kilogram of body weight, but we're very selective of where those fats come from, so from natural sources such as oily fish, avocados, nuts, seeds, etc. And then the remaining balance is made up from carbohydrates. And then the key is implementing these in small meals, 5 to 6 through the day, rather than what tends to happen is going through the day with minimal and then sort of binging at night because we're ravenous and we're absolutely starving because you've restricted yourself through the day. So in real terms, the colleagues referred to soulmate food earlier. This is what it looks like in an applied format, which is basically meals that are prepped and you eat day to day. And as George said, that'd be fantastic if that got posted every day to us through the letterbox, and that's all we did. However, that isn't reality, and we need to get our athletes, our jockeys, to be able to fend for themselves, and that's where we're moving forwards now. Despite jockeys knowing of our strategies of eating 5 to 6 small meals through the day, increasing protein, decreasing the amount of carbohydrates that we're taking on, they're still getting it wrong every single day. And although we are doing a lot right and we're doing a lot of good with a lot of jockeys, it's still very fair to say the majority of jockeys are doing it wrong. They are still using dehydrated strategies on a daily basis. So it's about educating them to be able to do this right for themselves consistently over the duration of their career. So this is the message that we're putting out, and we're putting out pretty strong. Like starving and chronic dehydration to make weight are not essential. They are cultural habits, and they are, unfortunately, they are effective, and that's why they've been around for so long. But they are cultural. Young jockeys come into the industry sort of expecting to do it and think, almost treating it as if it's part of the job. It's our job now to make them aware that it's not part of the job. It's a cultural habit that's old, before the era of sports science and nutritionists came into the industry, and it's our job to educate them, equip them with the tools to make weight safely throughout their career. So why is it still occurring? And it's down to education, and it's what I call a systemic lack of education. Systemic meaning it's not just the jockeys, it's throughout the whole industry, to be honest. So there's a lack of education in the jockeys ongoing throughout their careers. In the UK especially, jockeys are educated to a level at the beginning of their career during the licensing period. However, they are then left to their own devices. They could have a 30-year career and never once be challenged or be made or even invited quite often to engage in what we'd consider to be CPD. So myself, George, Phil, when Phil qualified as a doctor, however many years ago, medical advancements are phenomenally different. If he was still preaching what he preached 30 years ago, he probably wouldn't be able to cure half of the patients that he does now. It's the same sort of thing. Jockeys, they come into the industry at the beginning and they're not really educated any further. So that needs to change. The racecourse education, and I'll touch on this a little bit more shortly, because it's part of the research that I'm currently doing. But racecourses are sort of an entity to themselves in some ways, although they are a fundamental part of the culture and of the sport. The provision that's in the racecourse isn't governed in any way. So the racing yards and the trainers, not educated in terms of nutrition and optimal nutrition to get the most out of their riders. If I was given the opportunity to go and speak to some of the leading trainers in the UK and say, we can make your jockeys make weight easier and improve their physical performance, I don't understand why they wouldn't want to take that on, but it's getting the message out to them. One semi-recent development in the UK is jockey coaches. And although they do a fantastic job and they work with the jockeys on a day-to-day basis, they're not nutritionally educated. So although me as a nutritionist, George as a nutritionist, Phil as a doctor, we may not see them on a day-to-day basis. We may only see them on a fortnightly, monthly, maybe even longer basis. Jockey coaches see them every day. So they're often asked for advice about making weight. How did you do it? Jockey coaches are often ex-jockeys. And although they try and they have the jockey's best interests at heart, they don't necessarily have the best answers, the evidence-based answers. So we need to educate the jockey coaches as well to make sure that they're giving out the right information and we're all singing off the same hymn sheet as an industry. And finally, the actual education that we provide to jockeys during their licensing period. At present, they get about 3 hours. And that sounds shocking, and to be honest, it is. What we do in the 3 hours is great and it's interactive, but there needs to be more of an emphasis on making weight. Making weight is something that they do every single day of their career, yet we only employ 3 hours we only give 3 hours of time at the beginning of their careers towards it. It's almost like a tick box ticking exercise, I got there in the end, that we need to make an actual priority. So I'm just going to spend the next couple of minutes outlining how George's work over the last 3 years is actually impacting the industry in the UK at present and how it affects my day-to-day role with the BHA and the PGA. So we have 2 licensing colleges in the UK, one in the north at Doncaster, very close to where I live, and one down in Newmarket, which is the home of UK racing. So as I just alluded to, the week-long course that jockeys do, either as a conditional jump jockey or an apprentice flat jockey, we give them around 3 hours of nutrition education. Although it is good and it's interactive, we need to do more. But also, what we're able to do is offer these 2 locations for one-to-one consultations. So any jockey can book in with myself or my 2 colleagues, who also make up the PGA team, to book in for a one-to-one consultation, and that could be to help them devise a dietary regime, I won't say diet, or it could be for a one-to-one education session if they so wished. We also have 2 world-class injury rehabilitation facilities that are owned by the Injured Jockeys Fund, and there's also a 3rd on the way down in Newmarket as well, and very similar, other than the facilities are much better. We also do one-to-one consultations there, and we've got a much more regular presence there as well. We're trying to get there at least once a month if we can. Such as the facilities, we're able to also, that's, as Gary was alluding to earlier, that's where we're able to do the cookery workshops there. And again, these can be one-to-one. So if a jockey wants to really take on that professional stance and they want a host of recipes to take home with them, we can do it there. Or if they want to come as a group of friends, as a group of professional jockeys in 3s, 4s, 5s, we can do that as well. And the great thing is, all this is free to the jockeys. And to be honest, we are probably underutilised. So when Gary was asking earlier about numbers, yes, the numbers are rising and we're seeing more and more every month, but we'd love to be seeing a hell of a lot more as well. There's a trusted Liverpool John Moores where there's myself, George and the rest of the team, and the key feature there is they have the access to the full physiological assessment, so they're able to come and get DEXA scanned, they can have bloods taken, we can do the RMRs, we can do everything there. And basically we've got objective data to work with, and that's a real draw. And again, we're seeing more and more, week after week, we're getting 3 and 4 jockeys per week ringing up and asking to come down and use the facilities, which is great. We are moving in the right direction, but we need to do more. And finally, there's the race courses as well. So as part of my role is to visit the race courses, to liaise with the catering managers and the chief executives of race courses to try and improve the food provision that's out there. Again, aligning with the principles that George laid out: high fibre, high protein food, low in saturated fats, and foods that the jockey's going to want to eat. So in terms of the work that George has done, when we consider he's been researching for 3 to 4 years now, and he's written probably well over 50 or 60,000 words, how do we get that message to the jockeys? Because after all, as George said, we can't hold their hands forever. There needs to be a certain level of autonomy. And we've packaged it up as the 8 principles of racing nutrition. And based off what George has said, we've basically whittled 50,000 words down to 8 bullet points, really. And these are the 8 points that or 8 education points that we promote and stick to as an industry now, when jockeys come for guidance, cookery workshops, whatever it is. And it's working really, really well. Historically, because we didn't have the knowledge at the time, we've been working off guidelines from team sports, endurance sports, and jockeys are a unique set of athletes. Now we have that data based off the work from George. We're able to provide a bespoke set of guidelines for jockeys. And last year, this data was presented at Hong Kong by Paul Struthers, who's the chief executive of the PGA, and it was really well received. I'm not sure if it was the Australia's Jockeys Association or was it the New South Wales Jockeys Association. They got in touch and they asked permission if they could also sort of take them down to Australia as well. So it's great to see that it's not just in the UK, these rules are being applied much further afield as well. So my final bit then is what are we doing at Liverpool at the minute in terms of educating them. So we need to develop, implement and evaluate an industry-specific nutritional education package for jockeys. And I emphasise industry-specific. Historically, what's happened with nutritionists is they've come from team sports, such as I have, to be honest, and they've tried to apply the same principles from team sports and blindly apply them to jockeys without having knowledge or consideration of the culture of professional jockeys and professional horse racing. So the first thing, and this is what I'm doing at the minute, so much of my time is spent up trying to establish what is the perception of the industry of jockeys. Us along this panel see jockeys as professional athletes, the professional sports people, in our eyes, the professional athletes. But what does the industry actually see of them? So what about the trainers, the agents, the race courses? Do they see them as athletes, or do they just see them as jockeys, as men who get in a horse and race them? At the same time, I'm also doing an intensive audit of the food that's being provided at race courses as well. And I'm going through hours worth of interviews with chief executives of race courses to find out what determines what they provide on race day. Is it a case of budgets? Do they put out what's cheap because it actually comes out of the race courses fund? It's not subsidised by the BHA or the jockeys themselves. So is it a case of budgets? Or is it a case of this is what the jockeys ask for, and even if it's not great, it's what they want, so it's what we give them? Or are some race courses doing what they think is right? Ultimately, what we want to get out of it is to redevelop the food provision across all UK race courses to provide good food that aligns with the principles from George's previous research, but also food that's tasty, that jockeys are going to want to eat and they're not going to push back against and want to get it back out of the race courses. Very shortly, I'll be starting on my second study, which is to identify the ethnography of modern-day jockeys. The word ethnography means, or very loosely, is to determine who is the modern-day jockey. What are their beliefs and values? I'm interested in seeing how do they perceive themselves. Do they perceive themselves as athletes? Or do they perceive themselves as a jockey as well? And why do they have these perceptions? Similarly, because we are going to educate them, we need to find out how do jockeys want to be educated? And what are their current English and maths levels like? Historically, education has been very much fact sheet based, like basically a lot of words on paper. But do jockeys want to learn like that? I'm not sure they do. They're very active people, and we actually know that quite a lot of jockeys drop out of school early to pursue a career in horse racing. So maybe their literacy skills aren't great. So maybe they need to be learning in a more applied context. This is what this research is. If we're going to develop a package that's effective, it needs to be dictated and informed by the jockeys themselves. If we just deliver what we think is effective, it may be a waste of time and a waste of a lot of money. Once we've done that, we will go ahead and we'll develop the education package, make it look professional, and then we will implement it. And then finally, we'll evaluate the effectiveness of it. And hopefully, it will work. And if it doesn't, we can tweak it and find out what we need to do. But ultimately, we're wanting to affect the industry in terms of a potential regulatory change to make the education, part of their licensing. That's everything from me. John?
Cheers, thanks, Dan.
So ultimately, we've talked about this before, the education is there, but ultimately, as we keep pointing out, it's really down to the dedication, isn't it, George, for the jockeys?
Yeah, it is. Dan, can I stop the marker? I'll just fly through. Folks, give us 2 more minutes of your time. I think I'll summarise this really quickly. Thanks, Dan. Cheers. Let's put it into practical sense, right? Dan's talked about anticipated thing. Give people practical examples. You show someone that and go, you eat 4 biscuits and a cup of tea, it's 334 calories. Have an omelette, it's 200. Education, it's all about being simple. Show them good choices and bad choices. Absolutely simple. No one can get that wrong. Show, don't eat that, eat that. There's your lunch, do the same. There's your dinner, do the same. There's your choices of fats, do the same. It works. It works for anyone in this audience. And also, importantly, as Dr. Jamal was saying about your micronutrients, get your micronutrients right. Understand your immune system. Understand your bones. We heard about the breeding today with the horses and all that. You've got to get the micronutrients right in youngsters. The same with people. Bones metabolic, it turns over. You've got to get it right. Okay? Eat regularly throughout the day. It's simple. Don't starve yourself. There's no point in doing it. There's a little schematic I've drawn. You get up, you have a breakfast, a snack, a lunch, a snack, a dinner, snack. You go to bed happy. You can do that as a jockey. You can eat. I heard some of the jockeys talking before, I eat chocolate, eat this. Why do people need to associate the small size of something with how much calories in it? Chocolate is very energy dense. An omelette isn't, but an omelette's 4, 5, 6, 10 times bigger than a couple of pieces of chocolate. But the important thing is, from my research, and we see, is that you have to exercise. You're an athlete. We know from the research, fasted exercise, the way nature intended for everybody in this audience, you get up and you get out and you look for food. That hasn't changed in your DNA, your genetics. It's not changed in thousands of years, and you haven't changed it now. You get up, you exercise, and then you can eat basically right throughout the day, 5, 6, 7 times a day. Don't go hungry. Absolutely goes totally against your whole absolute physiology. And remember our mantra to finish, the LGMU mantra. You can't supplement a poor diet, so taking supplements, live on the protein diet, live on the carb, it just doesn't work, and you can't sustain it. And I'd say I hate the word diet, but you can't sustain that regime. Remember my mantra, if it grows in the ground, grows on a tree, or you can catch it, eat it. Yeah? There you go, thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, George. Funny enough, that is exactly the same thing that you sent me, but it was interesting when I followed that. Some of the things that I thought were good choices were actually bad choices. It was interesting to find out, and I'm sure if anybody wants any info off George, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to pass that on. But Phil, we were talking about that, it's the mentality of the jockeys. You spent the time in the weighing room. We'll open it up after this. Trying to get into their minds that they can actually eat more and still make the weight. That's the big issue.
Again, in summary, George has summed it up absolutely perfectly. But our jockeys here have said we need to treat these people as professionals. Dan's point about he wants to find out how the jockeys look at themselves. We've got to get it through. Jockeys are professional athletes, okay? Now, they're the one or two athletes that will perform, but their result is dependent on the horse underneath them. Okay, so it's very difficult to get the jockeys to say, hey, the harder I train, the better the result will be. No, the horse produces the results, and we can discuss, the percentage of the horse to the jockey. But as we were saying, Linda, 3 pixels, that's the difference on a photograph of coming second, dead heating, or winning. 3 pixels. And if a jockey can't improve himself 3 pixels, it's a poor shout. We hope to make sure that jockeys understand the principles of being a professional athlete, and little changes in their regime will produce big results. Abu Dhabi has helped spread, we've just heard Pat Buckley say how the conference and His Highness Sheikh Mansoor has done so much for promoting Arabian. It's now our time to start promoting jockeys' health. Victoria in Australia do it, okay? And Chris has taken it further afield. But come on, let's start it. Let's get it going from here, now.
Do we have any questions? I'm conscious we're a little bit short of time, and we usually get about 6 or 7 hands go up. I think the... We have a down front.
Okay, I want to thank everybody, but my question is got nothing to do with the health of the jockey. As a trainer, I am asking a question. There is a camera to watch the result of the finish of the race, but if there is any cameras watching the jockey, if any of them is playing with the result of the race?
And the stewards would.
Is there any jockeys are playing with the result if they are holding or they're winning?
That's maybe something for another discussion, perhaps.
Can I have a word on that? I think, first, we're all here to make money. We all love horses. It is our job to ride your horses, to take them the best for them to perform. But on the end of the day, there is only one winner. We're all here to have money. We all want to win, not only for money. We love to win. We are competitors. We love to win. I will not say what you mentioned doesn't exist. Some jockeys are holding. This is not a secret. But in our country, in Emirates, there is no point for any jockey to hold your horses because there is no betting. Why jockeys are holding? Because they cheat, because they have things with certain people for money. But in Emirates, there is no point for us to do that. There is no gambling.
Even
in Australia, it's probably different.
Even if there is no gambling, but I am asking, is
No,
there is anybody watching these things if it happens?
Of course, the
or
steward,
no?
the steward are
Yeah.
watching us. Steward are
It's
watching
stewards,
us,
yeah.
Salah. Steward
Yeah.
are watching us.
These things
And
are very
you,
heavily-
as a trainer, if you're not happy about us, you can go to complain
I
to
am
them.
very happy about you, exactly.
Thank
you
you,
are
I
my
know.
best jockey.
Mashkura, mashkura.
But I don't mean you, but I mean...
No, I mean, I talk for, not between me and you, for all of us.
Yes.
You, as a trainer, you're allowed to go to the steward room and mention, like, look, I just would
Yeah.
like you to have a look on this jockey because I think he didn't give the best to my horse.
I
but
cannot judge them because if there is a steward to
That's
watch
why
these
they are
things,
here
I've
for
never
that.
heard that somebody have been like stopped or because he hold. I've never heard in the UAE they stopped some jockeys for that. If they
Well-
are really watching, then they've never stopped anybody.
Well, so I think Stuart have to watch us a bit
These,
more.
these things are heavily policed over at the UAE, aren't they? Is that yeah? So it's not something that we could accuse you of ever.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. There was a question. I think it was the young gentleman down at the front. I think might actually be a jockey. Just down here. Can we have the mic down here, please? Yeah, she's good.
Hello. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for the hard work you've done. We've been in touch with Philip, and he helped us a lot. We think the diet is great, but we also think it's not only about the diet. It has to be with the weight scale, which is 150 years old. And as Xavier said, the population has grown a lot. And that's why I think Linda can't tag 50 kilos and she has to tag 54. In Argentina, our lower weight is 48 kilos, and there's no jockey doing that. Last week, we had 3 jockeys banned for overweighting, and 10 of them had to pay for the same reason. Well, as we must know, jockeys don't eat or don't drink water to do weight, as it happened to Xavier in Dubai his first time. And then they can't sleep, they get their muscles cramped. We don't have to forget that he lives with a family and the family suffers a lot too. We'd like to know if you can help us or have a talk about having a universal minimum weight as 54 kilos in Australia. And also to maintain the weight entrance to each school. If I change the weight scale and change my school weight, it will be the same. So thank you very much, and thank you, doctors.
Thanks to you.
You started off with a really good point there, because as the world, we are all eventually we're getting bigger. So that will mean, I should imagine, in most countries that the minimum riding weight will have to gradually increase it, or just have to. But what these studies have proved, that you've got to get the mentality right beforehand, otherwise you're just back to square one.
Yeah, can I come in there? Yeah. I think we can't underestimate the psychological side of this, because we work with a good cohort of about 15 senior professionals who've stuck to the game, and they'll maintain their weight, but they have to be realistic. If you are 1.75 meters, as jockeys were saying, Christophe Soumier is 1.75, so that's a couple of inches, maybe 5 centimeters smaller than me. So he's a tall guy, as we know. He's a very thin guy. But to ask Christophe Soumier to do a ridiculously low weight, but he has to take the responsibility himself and say, I am going to stick to my minimum weight, which is safe. Now, I know they do that in certain countries, Chris, and they do that. But nobody in many regional authorities stops any jockey walking in the weighing room, sweating 2, 3, 4 kilos off, running around a track in a sweatsuit. They've already come there dehydrated anyway. And also the point that young gent was just saying, who knows a rider, I think it makes sense to have our minimum weight globally, because if you're riding a 54 kilo in Australia, and then you're in Ireland and you're 55 kilo, and then you go into other countries like the USA, which is like 48, 49 kilo. I think it's not a level playing field. And psychologically, on a jockey, I'm thinking, well, I can't go there because I'm a 54k rider. I can't ride in those handicaps. So I think the racing industry has to look at itself, but also the jockeys have to take the responsibility themselves as well. Why don't jockeys?
It varies.
Because I'd say, to answer your question, Laura, sorry to take this, Phil, I'll pass it over to you now. But historically, I think the jockeys have been an afterthought.
Maybe Philip, you were in the racetracks. Where is the jockey clubs here? When you were at jockey club, all these jockeys belong to the jockey club. If they don't educate well how to lose weight and how to maintain their weight, they will not go into this program. You've educated the program, you've made the research, and you want to develop it. But once you don't have the esteem, the holding right, who wants to help them, not help us.
Yeah.
We've already did a research,
Yeah.
but where is the jockey clubs here in the countries that needs to help and integrate the research on the jockeys themselves?
Yeah.
Tomorrow's race on the Sunday, we have problem with 2 girls. They have a weight problem.
Yeah. Lara,
For example.
you've nailed it, absolutely nailed it, because in the UK, the British Horse Racing Authority basically were not interested in the jockey's well-being. They produce the regulations, and me as a racecourse doctor has to take those regulations to the racecourse. There was not any help for the jockeys themselves. The British Horse Racing Authority is a regulatory industry. It's not there to promote the jockey's health. Other countries have seen the importance of promoting the jockey's health, especially Victoria in Australia, and Chris is spreading the word. But certainly in the UK, and I'm sure in many other countries, the regulatory body has enough jockeys. They don't really care about jockeys. It's slowly, in the UK, I may add, in the UK, we have a new racecourse, a new chief medical officer, Dr. Jerry Hill, and I am very encouraged with him. Peter Wind is in the audience. He comes from Germany, and you would agree, Peter, you know, unfortunately, there's a regulatory body, and there is no one there to help the jockeys. Peter and myself regularly get phone calls from the jockeys to put them back together when they're broken. What we need is to establish something to stop them getting broken in the first place, and somewhere where the jockeys can come to us. We can treat them individually. We heard the trainers train their horses individually. We need to treat jockeys individually.
Yeah, but Philip, before we go into treating the jockeys bone, let us teach them how to lose weight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we treat them.
Yeah.
Because this is it's a step that first, if you don't look after your body control, when you are too skinny, you have a problem. And once you have weight and you lose all this in 4 days, that's a big problem to your own health.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we were
so
saying...
where are you helping them?
In France, you are tested and you are given a minimum weight, and that may be adjusted as you grow up. We have kids come in at 16, okay, and the racing schools do a magnificent job. They've got 6 weeks to train them, how to muck out, how to ride, and whatever. A few of those people who are trained will go on to become jockeys. That's where we need to pick them up. The ones that are showing promise as far as their racing career is concerned, right? They've gone through the normal jockey school stuff, but what we need is to pick them up and then give them these educations and monitor their weight.
This is already been done. In Ifhra, the apprentice schools are already there, and we are implementing John Moore's Liverpool with Sheikh Mansoor Festival research. But we're talking about the big jockeys, the professional ones. These are the jockeys that are facing problems. If it's not a lady, it's the men. And every single man is losing his weight within 3-4 days. He has to go sauna or kill himself, I don't know, sports, running, sauna, stop eating or drinking. This is unhealthy for their own health. But the problem with them is that they're not good listeners. No. That's the problem with jockeys. They're not good listeners. They do not want to admit we have a problem.
They are stuck in tradition. I'm afraid it's tradition, myth, and what other jockeys have done before them. I, as you know, is very close to A.P. McCoy, champion jockey 20 times in the UK. He had the benefit of all the help from George and the team from Liverpool. Did he change? No. Chips, mayonnaise.
He will never change because they don't want to listen.
Exactly. He never once put up a pound.
But once the jockey club puts on them rules, then they will all listen.
We hope.
And I think that's what we have to do, is to make the jockey clubs accept such research, or that there is a problem with jockeys themselves. And the jockey clubs, I'm sure, they don't want jockeys to have initially lots of issues.
Lara, can I come in? Just to summarise the thing you're saying. The easiest way we can solve this overnight, if every racing authority across the world said, we get your height, your weight, your body fat percentage done, not just with no disrespect to calipers, but a little bit more scientific, perhaps with DEXA scan, and everybody has to go through the process. We establish your absolute safe, hydrated, we check plasma osmolality in the blood, check your hydration levels so there's no kidney and renal problems, and we say, that is your minimum weight. So Christophe Soumier, to use the example, goes in, he's 175. Okay, Christophe, yeah, we'll have you at 8% body fat. That's as low as we want to take you. You need about 5 kilos of fat to live. We'll keep it at that. You at your lightest, hydrated, is a 55k rider. That's it. And that's it. You can't ride any lower. So if you do that everywhere, otherwise you're leaving it to the jockeys, and the jockeys will do anything to take a ride. You'll run around, you'll do anything to lose weight because you're going to make money. And there's an argument how much that affects your performance. We know from research it does, but jockeys will maintain in their own heads. I've done this for years. I'm not going to change. I've ridden 5,000 winners. Why should I change? I've been making myself sick every day, dehydrating. But if you want to change things, you have to start, changing rules. That's what I'd say.
So what about the USA? Is there anything for the jockeys from jockey clubs to control the jockeys? Not you, Argentina. Let's talk about USA.
I'd like to finish what I was saying.
Okay.
Great. Yes, I know I look tall, but I'm not jockey and I don't pretend to be. When jockeys who are 40 years old now, 20 years ago, they could tag light, right? But once you go growing or you get older, you don't do the same way that years before. And now our apprentices are not small. They are much bigger. And that's what we see as a problem. First of all, thank you, Lara, for your support. You say that your will is to jockeys not to ride lower than what his body lets them. And so if we have all jockeys tall, then no one rides.
Gary, I think it's proven that Lara said the jockeys have problems listening. But I think if industry listens to the jockeys and they have good representation in their Jockeys Association, and the industry takes action on their needs, and I know in Australia, insurances, riding fees, which are commensurate with the risks associated with being a jockey, retirement funds, subsidies for their training, all those things are going to make the jockeys feel valued. And if you listen to their needs, they'll start responding to the industry. And things like weight control, they'll start listening to what needs to be done about weight control. And if you treat them like athletes, then they will treat themselves like athletes. And
Guys,
that's been proved. I think Linda would verify that that's been proven.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? We've got the champion jockey of the United Arab Emirates here, Richard Mullen. Would you please stand up? You wanted to make a comment.
I did, yes. First of all, thanks very much for His Highness Sheikh Mansoor and Lara for inviting us. Not many chances we get as jockeys to come to these conferences. It's been very constructive. I'd just like to touch base on what the jockey over here said about raising the weights. That's all well and good, but I guarantee you, if you raise the weights, it's all education again. The guys that are doing 52 kilos, if you raise it to 54, they're going to struggle to do 54. It's not an issue of raising the weights. It's like you say, and what you guys are doing is fantastic. It's the first time I've seen it. It's unbelievable. I'd like to have a chat with you afterwards about it. But for me, it's not about raising the weights. It's the educational factor. Like I say, for this guy, he says the guys in Argentina are 48 kilos. Okay, you raise that to 50 kilos. I guarantee the same guys will be doing a kilo over at 50. It's the mentality factor, like you say, that jockeys, they'll just go laxy-daisy and say, right, I'm not gonna, I can afford to.
Can I ask you a question? I know you're very slim and very fit. How do you lose weight?
Like I say, listen, I'm very fortunate, and I've always been able to control my weight. The main factor I've always, and it's been a major priority, I avoid saunas like the plague. I refuse to go in there. I'd rather go for a run, but I mean, I exercise every day. Like you said, it's all well and good exercising, but you have to eat the right food. You can exercise all day and then go for a KFC. It's going to be pointless. You have to eat regularly, like you said, but exercise is vital. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, education is a huge factor in this.
Richard,
spot on. Thank you.
Richard and I were speaking last night. Richard and I were talking last night, and I'm glad to report that Richard is one of the, what I consider about 5% of professional jockeys who treat themselves as professional athletes. And we just have to try and educate the other 95%.
But again, it comes down to the dedication as well, because I was talking with Richard as well, and how he plans his meals, similar to what you guys have just shown there, how he goes through it with his wife and all the way that he goes through it and how those meals are planned. And if Richard's got the time to do it, then obviously it's a very busy industry. You could be travelling all over the place in the UK, but you just got to try and make that time to make it possible.
Can we say thank you very much indeed? I think this has been so informative. These guys are top class. Agree, disagree? But by Jove, the ideas are there. Gary, superb. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. There is more tomorrow, and the buses will leave at 6:30 to 6:45 tonight. And don't forget, you might like to take a shawl or a coat, because we'll be eating outside in